He left her heartbroken and alone. But she married the man everyone wanted, and now he's trapped in the regret of what he threw away. Hi my beautiful family. I have missed you all. Thank you so for sticking around with me. I truly appreciate your love and support. If you're already hooked in for today's story and ready to enjoy it, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because, tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. The rain drummed softly against the tiny apartment window, each drop echoing in harmony with the trembling of Emma's hands. She sat on the edge of the threadbare couch, fingers clasped over the small swell of her belly. Her heart thumped in uneven rhythms, not just from the baby growing inside her, but from the storm of betrayal she felt roiling inside. Across the room, a half-empty mug of cold coffee steamed faintly, abandoned on the table. She hadn't touched it in hours. Outside, the city was alive with its usual chaos, horns blaring, footsteps splashing through puddles, neon lights flickering like restless ghosts. Inside, Emma felt a suffocating silence. The sound of the front door clicking closed had ripped her world apart just minutes ago. Daniel, the man who promised forever, had walked away, leaving her alone, scared, and carrying the most profound consequence of their love, her child. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the window, tasting the bitter tang of tears. Why didn't he stay? She whispered into the empty apartment. Her voice cracked. I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me? The answer had been there in his cold, sharp eyes when he had said it. I can't do this, Emma. I'm not ready, and I don't think I ever will be. His words weren't loud, but they hit like sledgehammers. Every syllable had shattered her trust, her dreams, her heart. Emma wasn't just heartbroken, she was enraged. Her mind flashed to the life she had imagined with Daniel. Weekend breakfasts, late-night walks in the park, the sound of her child's first laugh. All of it dissolved into a bitter haze of disappointment. And yet, somewhere beneath the hurt, a seed of resilience stirred, a whisper of defiance she didn't yet know she could hear. Across the city, in a penthouse that gleamed like liquid gold under the night sky, Adrian Hale, the most desired billionaire in the country, surveyed the skyline from his floor-to-ceiling windows. His hands rested on the glass, fingers splayed as if he could somehow hold the city in his grasp. Everything about Adrian radiated control, power, wealth, and an almost frightening calm. But his eyes betrayed a flicker of something else. Curiosity. He was at a charity gala earlier that evening, a sea of gowns and tailored suits, champagne flutes and hollow laughter. Yet it wasn't the glamour that held his attention. It was a moment he couldn't forget, a young woman with fire in her eyes, who seemed to move through the crowd untouched by pretension. There was something unclaimed about her, something raw, and it tugged at a part of him he rarely allowed to stir. Adrian didn't know her name. He only knew that in a room full of ambition, vanity, and compromise, she had not bent. She had stayed herself. And that subtle defiance, that quiet strength, was more magnetic than anything money or influence could buy. Meanwhile, Emma gathered the courage to stand, her fingers lingering on the swell of her belly. She wasn't ready to let the world see her broken, not yet. She would survive. Somehow. A deep inhale steadied her racing heart. Every instinct screamed that she needed a plan, that she couldn't rely on the man who had abandoned her. I'll show him. I'll show him exactly what he threw away. Her phone buzzed softly on the table. She glanced at it, heart lurching, only to find a text from Daniel. I think you should be alone right now. Maybe it's for the best. Emma stared at the message, stomach twisting. Regret. She wanted to feel pity for him, for the man who had hurt her so deeply, but it was buried beneath a sharper emotion, anger. She typed a response, then deleted it. No words could capture the betrayal, the mixture of fear and grief that churned inside her. And so, she left the phone silent. She had a life to reclaim, a future to secure, not for him, but for herself and the tiny life growing inside her. Meanwhile, Adrian returned to his study, his gaze falling on the floor-to-ceiling shelves lined with rare books and awards. Yet, in a strange twist, his thoughts were not on the empire he had built, but on the image of that woman, the fire in her eyes, the quiet defiance. Something about her pain, about her strength, had struck a chord in him. He didn't understand why, but he knew he would not forget her. Outside, the rain softened, turning into a gentle drizzle. Emma opened the window slightly, letting the mist kiss her face. She allowed herself one small smile, a fragile glimmer of hope. The world had not ended. It was simply beginning a new chapter, one she intended to write on her own terms. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted most? What would you do if your world was suddenly turned upside down? Comment below. I want to know what you would do in Emma's shoes. As the night deepened, two lives moved forward on separate paths, unaware that fate was weaving a connection that would change everything. Emma, hurt but unbroken, prepared to face a world that had cast her aside. Adrian, powerful yet intrigued, had glimpsed something real, a spark that no wealth or privilege could ignite. And somewhere in the shadows of regret, Daniel would soon realize that abandoning what he couldn't understand might cost him everything. The following morning, Emma awoke to the harsh, sterile light of the apartment's single bulb, the shadows of last night's tears still etched under her eyes. She could still feel the weight of Daniel's absence, like a physical presence pressing against her chest. Her fingers instinctively traced the curve of her stomach, feeling the tiny, rhythmic movements of the life she was carrying, a life that belonged only to her now. Every sound outside her window was amplified. The squeak of a neighbor's shoe on the wet pavement, the distant wail of a siren, even the faint rustle of a plastic bag caught in the wind, it all reminded her that the world moved on, indifferent to her pain. And yet, a deep ache inside her demanded justice, demanded recognition of the betrayal she had suffered. She remembered Daniel's words, how effortlessly he had dismissed her, how easily he had walked away. She wanted to scream, to throw something, to shake the universe until it returned what had been taken from her. Instead, she poured herself a cup of lukewarm and sank into the chair by the window. The aroma was faint, yet it grounded her, a small comfort in a world that had gone suddenly cold and cruel. Meanwhile, Daniel sat across town in a cafe, staring at his hands wrapped around a coffee cup. The sunlight streaming through the window illuminated his face, but it did nothing to warm the frostiness in his chest. Regret gnawed at him like a persistent animal. He tried to convince himself that he had done the right thing, that he wasn't ready to be a father. Yet, each imagined smile of Emma, each imagined flutter of the child in her womb, stabbed at him like 1,000 tiny knives. He could see her now, in his mind's eye, standing alone in their apartment, staring at the rain-slick streets outside. She looked small, fragile, yet there was a light in her eyes he had never noticed before. Fear mingled with determination. Strength, even in heartbreak. And suddenly, he realized what he had lost before he had even understood its value. The day moved on, indifferent to both of them. Emma received a notice in the mail that she had to attend a mandatory appointment at the hospital for prenatal care. With a heavy sigh, she dressed and stepped outside into the wet streets, the rain having softened to a drizzle. The world smelled of damp concrete and asphalt, a sharp contrast to the warm, protective cocoon of her apartment. She pulled her coat tighter around her, the baby bump hidden yet unmistakably present. At the hospital, she navigated the sterile hallways with quiet determination, trying to keep her head down, to avoid any unnecessary confrontation with the world. But the universe had its own way of forcing encounters. As she sat in the waiting area, her thoughts a storm of betrayal and fear, she noticed a figure across the room, a man impeccably dressed, exuding an aura of confidence and warmth. His eyes caught hers for a brief second, and she quickly looked away, heart inexplicably stirring. Adrian Hale had arrived for a charity medical screening event. When he saw her, it wasn't recognition but curiosity that pulled at him. She radiated a raw, unpolished strength that intrigued him. There was a vulnerability in her posture, a story etched in the lines of her face, and he couldn't stop watching. For a moment, the bustling hospital, the beeping monitors, the murmurs of patients, all melted into insignificance. Emma's phone buzzed with another message from Daniel, but this time it was empty, just his name staring back at her like a ghost. Anger flared hot and sharp. She typed a reply, fingers trembling, but deleted it once more. Her voice would not be weaponized against herself. Not today. Not ever again. In that moment, their eyes met again. Something passed between them, an unspoken acknowledgement of life, struggle, and strength. Adrian offered a faint, almost imperceptible smile, and Emma, feeling the odd comfort of a stranger's quiet understanding, returned it. No words were spoken, yet an emotional chord had been struck, echoing in both hearts. Hours later, Emma left the hospital, the rain having stopped completely. The streets were glistening like spilled silver, reflecting the neon signs and streetlights. She felt a strange mix of exhaustion and hope. She had survived the night. She would survive the coming weeks, months, and years. And as she walked past a cafe window, she caught a glimpse of herself. Tall, poised, determined. She didn't recognize the fear she had once carried, it had been replaced by resilience. Meanwhile, Daniel scrolled social media, unable to focus on his work, unable to escape the gnawing regret that had taken residence in his chest. He saw her name mentioned in passing in a news article about rising young professionals, a subtle reminder that life moved on without him. His fingers tightened around the phone, and he whispered the words he could not send. I was wrong. I have lost everything that mattered. Have you ever regretted letting someone go, only to realize their worth too late? Share your story below. I want to hear your experiences. As night fell, the city's lights glittered like distant stars, and two lives moved on separate paths, one fueled by regret, one by the first flicker of hope. Emma clutched her coat tighter, feeling the baby kick gently, a reminder that she was never truly alone. Adrian returned to his penthouse, thoughts lingering on the stranger who had left an unshakable mark on him. And Daniel, alone with the weight of his choices, finally understood that some mistakes cannot be undone, only lived with. The emotional spark had been lit, the stage set for collision, growth, and unforeseen love. The world had shifted, and none of them would ever be the same. Emma's days fell into a rhythm of careful avoidance. She refused to answer Daniel's messages, ignoring his calls that came like echoes from a life she no longer belonged to. Each ring felt like a tug on her raw nerve endings, and she clenched her fists to keep herself steady. The betrayal still burned, sharp and relentless, and she refused to give him the satisfaction of her pain. At work, her colleagues noticed her quiet intensity, the way she focused on the smallest details, as if controlling her environment could replace the love and trust she had lost. She buried herself in spreadsheets, client meetings, and paperwork, all the while feeling the weight of the life growing inside her. The tiny kicks in her belly reminded her of her own resilience, of her ability to carry on without anyone's permission. Daniel, meanwhile, was experiencing a resistance of a different kind. The initial shock of regret had worn off, replaced by a stubborn insistence that he could reclaim what he had lost. He visited their old favorite cafe, sat at their table by the window, hoping, praying, to catch a glimpse of her. But every time he saw her, the image that flashed in his mind was not the vulnerable girl he had abandoned, but a woman whose defiance radiated like a shield. His pride collided violently with the longing in his chest. He wanted to reach out, to explain, to apologize, but something inside him recoiled. Was it shame? Fear? Or the stubborn ego that had driven him to abandon her in the first place? Every word he rehearsed in his head fell flat, unspoken, swallowed by the walls of his own resistance. Emma's resistance was subtler but no less fierce. She refused to believe that Adrian, the billionaire whose name she had heard whispered in the city's elite circles, could ever have genuine interest in someone like her. She had seen the men of wealth and power. They were charming, confident, and utterly self-absorbed. She would not allow herself to be another fleeting curiosity. Her walls were high, her trust earned only through shared scars and true intention. And yet, she could not forget him entirely. Adrian's fleeting glance in the hospital, the faint smile that carried no condescension, haunted her thoughts. It was maddening. How could a stranger, someone so detached from her world, spark something inside her that Daniel had destroyed? She pushed the thought away, telling herself it was a fantasy, a distraction she did not need. One evening, rain slicked streets beneath her boots, she passed the same cafe Daniel frequented. Her heartbeat quickened, not from longing, but from defiance. She stepped inside, ordered a coffee to go, and found a corner seat by the window. She watched Daniel silently, studying his expression without giving herself away. His face was taut, his eyes troubled. The sight should have given her satisfaction, the power of knowing he felt regret, but instead, it made her stomach twist. Adrian, unbeknownst to both, had arranged a charitable gala near the same cafe that week. Emma walked past the banners promoting it, feeling the old pang of cynicism in her chest. She doubted herself, doubted people, doubted that love could ever be real again. Her resistance wasn't just about Daniel, it was about the fear that anyone could take what little trust she had left and shatter it. The world seemed intent on forcing collisions. Later that night, as she walked home, she spotted Adrian helping a child retrieve a lost toy from a puddle. His movements were effortless yet gentle, commanding yet kind. For a brief moment, Emma froze. Could someone like him truly care? Could someone like him see me for more than what I carry, what I've endured? She shook her head, reminding herself that her trust was not for sale. Daniel's inner battle reached a peak when he confronted himself in the mirror that night. His reflection was a stranger, a man full of remorse, a man who had thrown away the one woman who had believed in him unconditionally. "I can't lose her," he whispered, voice trembling. But then pride surged, cold and familiar. "I won't beg. If she wants to leave, she leaves. But I can't, won't, let her see me like this." Meanwhile, Emma lay in bed, the dim light from her bedside lamp casting shadows across the room. Her hand rested on her belly, feeling the faint stirrings of the baby. She whispered softly, "We're going to be okay. We don't need him. We'll survive. And we'll thrive." Her voice, quiet but resolute, echoed the defiance in her heart. She wasn't ready to forgive. She wasn't ready to fall. She wasn't ready to trust anyone, not yet. Have you ever resisted opening your heart after being hurt? How long did it take to trust again? Share your thoughts below. Let's talk about the walls we build to protect ourselves. As the night deepened, both Emma and Daniel wrestled with the same truth. The past could not be undone, but its shadow loomed large. She fortified her walls with pride and purpose, while he stumbled through regret and longing. Neither was ready for the paths fate had begun to weave around them. But soon, circumstances would force proximity, and with it, confrontation. The city slept under a velvet sky, but hearts were awake, restless, and waiting. The storm had passed, but the echoes of its damage remained. And somewhere in the quiet, a fragile thread of fate began to stretch between them, invisible yet undeniable, ready to pull them toward the moment when their resistance would meet reality. The storm had returned, rain pounding relentlessly against the city streets, turning sidewalks into slick rivers. Emma rushed through the downpour, clutching her coat tightly around her, hood shielding her face. Her umbrella had long since flipped inside out, leaving her soaked, shivering, and cursing her luck. Every step squelched in the wet pavement, every splash from passing cars soaking her further. Across town, Adrian Hale had attended yet another charity meeting when a sudden text pinged on his phone. "Emergency, local shelter needs volunteers due to flood." Without hesitation, he grabbed his coat and drove through the storm, the sleek luxury of his car skidding over wet streets. He arrived at the shelter, a modest brick building on the edge of downtown, only to find chaos. Children were crying, volunteers frantic, and staff stretched thin. Emma had arrived minutes before, wet and exhausted, dragging her coat behind her as she tried to navigate the crowded entryway. She had been sent here by a social worker assigned to help expectant mothers in need, and though the place smelled faintly of disinfectant and damp clothing, it was a haven of sorts. Yet the overcrowding, the noise, and the storm outside made it feel anything but safe. And then, she saw him, Adrian, standing in the center of the room, sleeves rolled up, directing volunteers with calm authority. His presence was magnetic, radiating confidence and warmth. For a fleeting second, their eyes met. Emma instinctively turned away, cheeks heating, forcing herself to focus on finding a seat for herself and the few supplies she had brought. But fate was unrelenting. Within minutes, she was assigned to assist him directly, moving boxes of blankets, toys, and food. Every brush of their hands, every glance shared, was charged with unspoken tension. Emma felt her pulse quicken, a mix of irritation and something she couldn't yet name. Adrian, equally aware, tried to mask his fascination with professional composure, though his gaze lingered far longer than necessary. "Careful with that," Adrian said, his voice calm, yet carrying an edge of concern. "The boxes are heavier than they look." Emma lifted the box higher, jaw tight. "I can manage," she replied, tone clipped. "I don't need anyone's help," she thought, though the chill in her soaked clothes made her shiver. 4 hours, they worked side by side, moving supplies, comforting children, and organizing donations. Words were sparse, but their actions spoke volumes. Adrian admired Emma's strength, her refusal to be overwhelmed, and the quiet authority she took among the chaos. She, in turn, noticed his patience, his unspoken understanding, and the ease with which he handled crisis without condescension. During a brief lull, they found themselves seated on opposite benches, both drenched, catching their breath. The sound of rain on the roof was rhythmic, hypnotic, filling the space between them with tension. "You're different from the rest," Adrian said finally, his voice low, carrying a subtle curiosity. "Most people either complain or give up when things get messy." Emma blinked, studying him. "And you're different from the rest?" she shot back, tone teasing, defensive. "Most people either flaunt their money or ignore the world. You actually help." He smiled faintly, a shadow of admiration in his eyes. "I believe everyone deserves more than what they're given, especially when circumstances are out of their control." There was a pause, pregnant with unspoken acknowledgement. The air between them was thick, yet unforced, charged with a growing awareness. For the first time in months, Emma allowed herself a small thought: maybe not everyone will abandon me. Meanwhile, news of the shelters flooding reached Daniel. Panic gnawed at him. Without thinking, he drove through the storm, hoping to find Emma safe. When he arrived, drenched and anxious, he was met with the sight of Adrian and Emma working together, laughter breaking through the tension as they organized the volunteers. Daniel's chest tightened with a sudden, visceral pang of jealousy and regret. He watched, unable to move forward, as Adrian handed Emma a blanket, their hands brushing. The unspoken connection between them was impossible to ignore. Daniel's presence, unnoticed by both, was a stark reminder that Emma's life was moving on without him, and he could do nothing to stop it. As the night drew on, the storm began to soften, the rain easing into a drizzle. Emma and Adrian finally stepped outside, exhausted but triumphant, the shelter now organized and calm. The air was cool, misty, and charged with the residual energy of shared work and quiet understanding. Emma adjusted her coat, finally allowing herself to glance at Adrian. "You didn't have to help me," she said softly, vulnerability creeping into her tone despite herself. "I didn't have a choice," he replied, eyes warm, hinting at something deeper. "Some things, you just don't walk away from." The sound of distant thunder rolled over the city, but the tension between them was electric, contained, and undeniable. Neither could articulate it yet, but both felt the first flicker of connection, an unspoken acknowledgement that fate had forced them together for a reason. Have you ever met someone unexpectedly in the midst of chaos who changed your perspective? Share your story below. Who surprised you when you least expected it? Emma walked home that night, drenched but exhilarated. She couldn't ignore the strange warmth lingering from her interaction with Adrian, though she quickly told herself it was nothing more than circumstance. Adrian, meanwhile, returned to his penthouse, replaying the day over and over, the way Emma moved, her strength, her fire, and for the first time in a long while, he wondered what it would be like to know her beyond fleeting glances and forced proximity. Daniel, soaked and fuming, watched from the edge of the street, a painful realization settling in. The walls Emma had built were no longer for him alone. Someone else was walking in, bridging the gap he had abandoned. And suddenly, he knew, regret alone could never bring her back. The night was quiet, the city glimmering under the streetlights. But in the hearts of three people, storms of emotion raged, and the first threads of destiny had begun to weave their tangled path toward love, confrontation, and unexpected transformation. The morning sunlight spilled across Emma's small apartment, illuminating the quiet disorder of her life. Stacks of prenatal books, half-folded laundry, and a single framed photograph of her and Daniel, smiling with naive certainty. She stared at it for a long moment, tracing the familiar lines of his face with her eyes, remembering the man she had once believed loved her. It had all begun 3 years ago, when Daniel was charming, ambitious, and reckless in a way that made her heart race. He had been everything she wanted: daring, witty, magnetic. They had talked about a future filled with laughter, children, and promises of forever. But beneath the charm lay an insecurity he refused to confront, a fear of commitment that would ultimately unravel everything. Emma's fingers lingered on her belly, remembering the day she first realized she was pregnant. She had hoped it would bring them closer, that the shared responsibility would deepen their bond. Instead, it revealed the cracks in his character, the inability to face consequences, the willingness to walk away from love when it demanded courage. His departure had felt like a physical blow, leaving her gasping for air, heart pounding, soul bruised. She remembered the long nights that followed, crying into the darkness, afraid, angry, and utterly alone. And yet, amid the despair, she had discovered a strength she hadn't known existed. The same strength that had carried her through the flooded shelter, that had allowed her to face Daniel's silent apologies, and that now allowed her to stand tall despite the world's judgment. Meanwhile, Adrian Hale returned to his penthouse, but his mind was not on spreadsheets or stock reports. He found himself rifling through an old journal, one he had kept as a young man navigating the pressures of wealth, family expectation, and loneliness. A photograph slipped from the pages, a younger Adrian with his parents, smiling yet distant, a reminder of the love he had longed for but never fully experienced. He thought of Emma, of her fire and vulnerability, and the connection he felt to someone who had endured betrayal yet refused to be broken. For the first time, Adrian recognized a mirror of his own loneliness, a shared resilience shaped by pain. And he realized that what drew him to her was not just admiration, but recognition of kindred strength. That evening, Emma attended a prenatal class in a community hall, reluctantly admitting that she needed help despite her pride. She noticed a familiar presence: Adrian, volunteering again, assisting expectant mothers with the same patience and care he had shown at the shelter. Their eyes met across the room, an unspoken understanding passing between them. As the class began, a nurse asked participants to share stories of their journeys, moments of fear, loss, and hope. Emma remained silent, but a memory rose unbidden. Her mother, who had died when Emma was just a teenager, had once told her, "You carry the power to survive everything, Emma. And one day, someone will see it, even when the world doesn't." She felt a surge of emotion, realizing that her resilience was not just hers, it was the inheritance of love and sacrifice. Adrian, observing from across the room, caught the faint tremor in her hands, the subtle tightening of her jaw, and understood more than words could convey. He saw the depth of her pain, the history etched into her every movement, and he respected it. Meanwhile, Daniel wandered aimlessly through the city streets, replaying moments he had thought insignificant: the day he laughed at her small worries, the nights he ignored her calls, the words he had tossed carelessly that now haunted him. Each memory was a reminder that he had been blind to love, and that his absence had cost him something irreplaceable. He wanted to reach out to explain, but the truth was bitter and inescapable: Emma had moved on. She was no longer waiting for him to awaken to his mistakes. Back at the community hall, a small incident brought Emma and Adrian together in a moment of vulnerability. A young mother, panicked and unable to calm her crying baby, was gently assisted by Adrian. Emma stepped forward instinctively, offering soft words of reassurance. Their hands brushed briefly, and this small contact carried the weight of unspoken understanding. Both had endured loss, betrayal, and isolation in their own ways. In the quiet aftermath, Emma turned to Adrian. You don't have to do this. You could walk away," she said, a faint edge of suspicion in her voice. He shook his head, eyes sincere. "I can't. Someone has to stand for those who are struggling. And I can't ignore you, either. You've been through so much, and yet, you keep moving forward. That takes courage." Her eyes flickered, betraying a hint of the vulnerability she tried so hard to conceal. "Courage isn't always enough," she whispered, almost to herself. "But it's a start," Adrian replied softly. The exchange was brief, yet it left an indelible mark. Both felt the stirrings of trust, the faint beginnings of a bond forged in recognition of each other's scars. Emma's past, Adrian's past, they were now intertwined in ways neither fully understood. Have past experiences shaped the way you trust or love today? How do your own scars influence your relationships? Share your thoughts below. We all carry stories that define us. As the night drew in, Emma returned home, the photograph of her and Daniel tucked away in a drawer. She realized that her past, while painful, had prepared her for something greater. Adrian, in his penthouse, stared out over the city, thinking of the woman who had survived heartbreak with grace, whose strength and vulnerability had quietly captured his heart. And Daniel. Daniel was left to confront the consequences of his choices, alone, a haunting echo of what he had lost. The stage was set. Secrets had been revealed, past wounds acknowledged, and the subtle threads connecting Emma and Adrian had begun to weave a tapestry of trust, attraction, and inevitable emotional collision. The story was no longer just about betrayal, it was about resilience, recognition, and the slow emergence of unexpected love. A week later, the city was alive with the golden haze of late afternoon sun, reflecting off glass buildings and glistening streets. Emma walked through the local park, carrying a small bag of groceries for a neighbor she had promised to help. Her pace was deliberate, but her mind wandered, back to Adrian. The memory of their hands brushing at the shelter, his quiet patience, the way he had understood her without judgment. It refused to leave her. She arrived at the neighbor's apartment, greeted with a tired but grateful smile. While placing the groceries on the counter, she felt a sudden tap on her shoulder. She turned, startled, and found Adrian standing there, umbrella in hand, rain from an earlier drizzle still clinging to his coat. "Hello," he said, voice calm, warm, and just slightly teasing. "I thought I might find you here." Emma's chest tightened, a strange mix of caution and curiosity. "I don't know why you'd be looking for me," she replied, attempting casual indifference, though her fingers curled around the strap of her bag. "I had to see if the city hadn't eaten you alive," Adrian said with a faint grin, though his eyes were earnest. "It's not polite to leave a woman to survive all this alone." Emma rolled her eyes, hiding the small smile that threatened to escape. "I can handle myself," she said firmly, though her voice lacked conviction. Adrian stepped closer, careful to respect her space, but the closeness made her heart race. "I know," he said softly. "That's why I'm impressed. But even the strongest people need allies. And I'd like to be one of yours." The moment hung between them, charged with quiet emotion. Neither spoke for several seconds, yet both felt the significance of the silence. Emma studied his face, noticing small imperfections, a faint scar on his wrist, a slight crease at the corner of his mouth when he tried to smile, that humanized him in a way his billionaire status could never mask. For the first time, she allowed herself to see Adrian as a person, not just a symbol of wealth and power. They spent the next few hours walking through the park, talking about everything and nothing. Emma laughed, a soft, genuine sound, when Adrian recounted a childhood memory of his father teaching him to ride a bike, only for him to crash spectacularly into the hedge. The sound startled her. She hadn't laughed like that in months, perhaps years. "You're different from anyone I've met," Emma admitted quietly, voice almost lost in the rustle of the trees. "You don't just observe the world, you actually care about it. And about people." Adrian glanced at her, expression softened. "And you see the world as it is, not just what it should be. That's rare. That's why I can't stop thinking about you." Her heart skipped a beat, but her walls immediately sprang back up. Don't say things like that," she whispered, looking away. "I'm complicated. Broken, even." He shook his head, voice gentle but firm. "No. You're strong. You've survived betrayal, hardship, and still, here you are, offering kindness to others. That's not broken. That's extraordinary." The words sank in, wrapping around her like a warm blanket. For the first time in months, Emma felt seen, not for her mistakes, her pregnancy, or her past, but for her resilience, her heart, her courage. They found a quiet bench beneath a large oak tree, the sun now low and golden. Adrian took a small, tentative step closer. "Can I hold your hand?" he asked softly. Emma froze, surprised. She wanted to say no, to maintain the walls she had spent so long building. But the loneliness of the past years, the constant pressure of facing the world alone, made her reach out. Their fingers intertwined, a small but powerful act of trust. "You're not what I expected," she murmured. "Neither are you," he replied with a warm smile. And in that moment, the distance between their hearts shrank, if only slightly. As twilight descended, the park emptied, leaving them alone with the quiet hum of the city in the background. They sat, hand in hand, speaking less and feeling more. Each glance, each smile, each subtle touch carried weight, proof of connection, understanding, and the first threads of love forming. Meanwhile, Daniel remained a distant shadow in Emma's life, his regret growing sharper with each day she spent smiling, laughing, and showing signs of a life moving forward without him. He sent messages she didn't answer, drove past familiar streets hoping to catch a glimpse, but her walls remained strong. The distance between them was not just physical, it was emotional, irreparable, and growing by the day. Have you ever found someone who made you feel truly seen after heartbreak? How did it change you? Share your story below. We all deserve to be recognized for our strength. By nightfall, Emma returned home, the golden light of the city reflected in her eyes. She no longer felt the sharp sting of betrayal as acutely. It had softened, tempered by her own resilience and the unexpected bond with Adrian. Adrian, meanwhile, returned to his penthouse, replaying their afternoon over and over, realizing that the connection they had formed was more than circumstance. It was the beginning of something rare, something worth fighting for. The emotional bond had been forged, not through grand gestures, but through understanding, shared vulnerability, and mutual respect. For the first time, Emma allowed herself to imagine a life where trust, love, and support could exist again. And Adrian, for the first time, understood that true desire went beyond wealth and charm. It was in recognizing the soul of someone extraordinary. The city was heavy with the scent of rain and smoke as Emma returned from a prenatal appointment one evening. Her mind lingered on Adrian, the warmth of his touch, the steady comfort of his presence. But a shadow of unease had begun to creep in. She couldn't quite place it, though her intuition, honed by months of survival, warned her that peace was fragile, temporary. Across town, Daniel was watching. He had discovered a social media post showing Adrian and Emma at a charity gala just days earlier. The image, innocent yet intimate, stirred a storm in him, jealousy mixed with desperation. He couldn't accept that she had moved on, that she could smile, laugh, and even allow herself to feel joy while he was left empty-handed. His fingers trembled over the keyboard as he typed a message he both wanted and feared to send. "Emma, we need to talk." Emma returned home, exhausted, dropping her bag onto the couch. Her phone buzzed incessantly. Messages from Daniel, missed calls, frantic apologies. She ignored them, each notification a hammer striking her resolve. She had survived him once, she would survive him again. Or so she thought. Later that evening, Adrian arrived unannounced, carrying groceries and a small bouquet of wildflowers he had picked on his way. Emma opened the door, surprised but pleased. "I didn't expect you," she said, trying to mask the flutter of her heart. "I thought you might like some company," Adrian replied, stepping inside. The apartment was small, cozy, filled with the quiet hum of domesticity. He placed the groceries on the counter, watching her move with a grace that reminded him why he couldn't stay away. For a moment, everything felt right. They shared laughter, conversation, and a subtle intimacy that was both thrilling and terrifying. Emma allowed herself a rare sense of comfort, letting her guard drop just slightly. Then the doorbell rang. Emma frowned, not expecting anyone else. She opened the door, and froze. Daniel stood there, soaked from the evening rain, eyes wide and desperate. "Emma, please, I need to explain," he said, voice trembling with guilt and pleading. Adrian stepped forward, protective yet restrained. "Who is this?" he asked, calm but firm. Emma's heart hammered in her chest. "It's Daniel," she said, voice shaking. "My ex." Daniel stepped inside before she could stop him, ignoring the tension that filled the room. "Emma, I know I hurt you," he began, voice thick with emotion. "I was a fool, a coward. Adrian's eyes narrowed slightly, but he stayed silent, letting Daniel speak. Emma's stomach twisted. She wanted to shout, to slam the door, to demand that Daniel leave her life for good. But a part of her, a tiny, vulnerable part, wanted to hear him, to witness the regret she had imagined in sleepless nights. Daniel's words poured out in a torrent, filled with apologies, confessions, and desperate pleas. "I see now what I lost, and I can't live with the thought of you moving on without me knowing. Please, just one chance." Emma's hand shook as she gripped the edge of the counter. Adrian, sensing the emotional storm, stepped closer. "Emma," he said softly, placing a steadying hand on her arm. "You don't have to answer him now. You don't owe him anything." But the damage was done. Emotionally, the room had shifted. Daniel's presence stirred memories she had tried to bury: betrayal, heartbreak, nights of fear and loneliness. She felt torn between the past she had endured and the future that was beginning to bloom with Adrian. A moment later, Daniel's eyes locked with Adrian's. "And you're the one she's with now?" he asked, disbelief and rage in his voice. Adrian's jaw tightened, but he remained composed. "Yes," he said simply. "She deserves someone who sees her worth." Daniel laughed bitterly, a sound that cut through the fragile calm of the apartment. "Worth? She was mine first. Emma's voice rang out, firm but trembling. "No. Daniel, stop. You lost that right the moment you walked away." But the tension had already fractured the delicate bond she shared with Adrian. Adrian, though patient, felt the walls Emma had rebuilt after years of pain begin to tremble under the pressure. He realized that the emotional storm was far from over. Daniel finally left, but not before casting one last lingering glance, part longing, part rage. The door clicked shut, leaving a silence heavier than any words. Emma sank onto the couch, chest tight, tears threatening to fall. Adrian knelt beside her, his hand gentle on her shoulder. "I'm here," he whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust the warmth that radiated from his presence. But the shadows of the past, Daniel's betrayal, his reckless abandonment, clung tightly. Emma's heart was torn between the familiar pain and the thrilling promise of something new. The night ended with Emma alone in thought, Adrian's hand still on her arm, and Daniel's shadow lingering outside the apartment window in her mind. The emotional shatter was complete. The bond had been tested, the walls had cracked, and the journey toward love would now demand courage, forgiveness, and choice. Have you ever felt your past collide with your present, threatening a new chance at happiness? How did you navigate it? Share your story below. Sometimes, love is about fighting for your heart. The stage was now set for the reckoning. Emma would have to confront her fear and trust, Adrian would have to prove his steadfastness, and Daniel would face the reality that regret alone cannot reclaim what was lost. The shatter point had arrived, and from this fracture, the choice would emerge. The city was quiet under a velvet night sky, but Emma's apartment was alive with the storm of her thoughts. After Daniel's departure, she sat on the edge of her bed, legs drawn up, phone untouched. Her fingers traced the outline of the small baby bump that had been the source of both fear and pride for the past months. The weight of responsibility, combined with the emotional wreckage Daniel had left, pressed on her chest like a physical force. She replayed the evening over and over. Daniel's desperate words, his eyes pleading for forgiveness, the surge of old affection she had thought buried. And then Adrian, steady, calm, unwavering, kneeling beside her, offering comfort without judgment. Her heart, stubborn and fragile, had never faced such a choice before: to cling to the familiar past or step fully into a future that promised both risk and hope. Adrian, meanwhile, paced in his penthouse apartment, phone in hand. He had considered giving Emma space, letting the storm pass, yet he couldn't ignore the anxiety gnawing at him. The thought of her wavering under the weight of the past was unbearable. He thought of her strength, her kindness, the spark that refused to be dimmed despite betrayal, and he knew he would wait as long as it took, but he could not remain passive. The next morning, Adrian returned to Emma's apartment, bouquet in hand, a calm determination in his gaze. He knocked softly, and when Emma opened the door, she found herself unable to speak. The lingering tension from last night hung like a storm cloud between them. "Emma," he began gently, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "I need you to know one thing. I'm not here to compete with the past. I'm here because I want a future with you. A future where you're safe, where you're seen, and where you're loved, for exactly who you are." Emma felt tears sting the corners of her eyes. She wanted to resist, to push him away, to protect her heart from the fragile hope rising inside her. Yet, the weight of his words, his unwavering gaze, and the gentle touch of his hand on hers broke down a barrier she hadn't realized was still standing. I'm scared," she admitted, voice trembling. "I've been hurt before, abandoned before, and I don't know if I can trust anyone again." Adrian nodded, understanding. "I know. And I don't expect you to. All I ask is that you consider the possibility that not everyone will leave, not everyone will hurt you. That maybe, love can exist, even after betrayal." She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time in months, allowed herself to imagine a life free from fear. The warmth in his eyes, the steadiness in his presence, and the genuine care in his actions were unlike anything she had experienced before. It was terrifying, exhilarating, and undeniable. Daniel, meanwhile, had reached the limits of his own recklessness. Realizing that Emma's heart had already begun to move forward, he finally understood the full extent of his choices. Standing outside her apartment, he whispered to himself, "I can't fix this. I lost her. And I have no one to blame but myself." Back inside, Emma took a deep breath, her hands brushing against Adrian's. "I choose you," she said, her voice firm but soft. "I'm ready to let go of the past and take a chance on us." Relief and warmth spread across Adrian's face, and he pulled her into a gentle, reassuring embrace. "Thank you," he murmured. "I promise to never give you reason to doubt." They sat together, hands entwined, the city lights casting a golden glow through the window. The choice had been made, not easy, not without fear, but rooted in trust, courage, and the recognition that love, once found, was worth fighting for. Have you ever had to choose between holding on to the past and embracing a new beginning? What guided your choice? Share your experience below. It might inspire someone else to take that leap. Daniel walked away that night, rain washing over his shoulders, realizing that regret alone could never reclaim what was lost. Emma and Adrian, on the other hand, sat quietly, their hands intertwined, hearts beating in synchrony, each understanding that love was not just a feeling but a choice, one they were committed to making together. The night was calm, but the emotional landscape had shifted irrevocably. The walls of fear and resentment had crumbled. Trust had begun to rebuild. And the story, though scarred by the past, was ready to blossom fully. The morning sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Emma's new apartment, casting golden streaks across the cozy living room. The city outside buzzed with life, but inside, there was serenity. Emma moved quietly, preparing breakfast, her hands gentle over the small loaf of bread and the soft hum of coffee brewing. The air smelled faintly of vanilla and fresh flowers, the bouquet Adrian had left last night now arranged neatly on the counter. She paused, glancing at the little life growing within her. Her fingers brushed against her belly, a smile curving her lips. Gone was the constant ache of fear, replaced by anticipation and quiet joy. She had survived heartbreak, betrayal, and abandonment, and in doing so, discovered her own strength. A soft knock at the door made her heart flutter. "Come in," she called, voice calm, yet laced with excitement. Adrian entered, carrying 2 mugs of coffee and a mischievous grin. "I made sure to get your favorite," he said, handing her the steaming cup. His eyes sparkled with warmth, a reflection of the devotion he felt. Emma accepted it, their fingers brushing briefly. "Thank you," she whispered, her gaze meeting his. "For everything. For being patient. For believing in me." Adrian stepped closer, hand resting lightly on her waist. "I don't need to thank me," he said softly. I get to be here. With you. That's enough for me. They sat together at the small dining table, the quiet comfort of shared breakfast wrapping around them like a cocoon. Laughter flowed easily now, lighter and freer than it had been in months, punctuated by teasing remarks and gentle touches. The bond forged through adversity had matured into something deeper, an unwavering trust, an unspoken promise of love. The day passed in a rhythm of peace and simple joy. Emma and Adrian strolled hand in hand through the city, stopping at a small park where they had first truly connected. The memory of the stormy shelter, of hands brushing, of moments of silent understanding, resurfaced but no longer carried pain. It was a reminder of how far they had come. Later, as the sun dipped below the skyline, casting amber light over the city, Adrian led Emma to a quiet spot near the water. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves, carrying the faint scent of flowers and the promise of new beginnings. He looked into her eyes, unwavering, and took her hands in his. "Emma," he said, voice steady, full of love and reverence. "From the moment I met you, I knew you were extraordinary. Every hardship you endured, every challenge you faced, brought you here, to this moment, with me. And I want to face every moment ahead with you. Will you be mine, completely?" Tears welled in Emma's eyes, but this time they were not of pain, they were of gratitude, joy, and love. "Yes," she breathed. "I am yours." He smiled, and they embraced, holding each other close as the city lights flickered around them. In that embrace was the promise of a future built not on wealth or convenience, but on trust, understanding, and unwavering love. Meanwhile, Daniel watched from a distance, silent, rain softly falling over his shoulders. He realized fully that what he had lost was beyond repair. Not just Emma, but the chance to witness her rise, her strength, and the happiness she had earned. Regret gnawed at him, yet there was a sense of finality in accepting that some doors, once closed, are never reopened. Back at the apartment, Emma and Adrian sat on the couch, legs intertwined, sipping coffee in comfortable silence. Their conversation drifted from trivial matters to dreams, hopes, and plans for the baby. The world outside continued its chaos, but inside, love had triumphed over betrayal, pain, and uncertainty. Emma rested her head on Adrian's shoulder. "You know," she said softly, "I never thought I'd find love like this. Unexpected, real, safe." Adrian kissed the top of her head, his own voice quiet but full of certainty. "Love at last," he murmured. "It was worth the wait. Worth every trial." The city lights shimmered in the window, a testament to beginnings and endings. Emma, Adrian, and the little life growing inside her had found their rhythm, their sanctuary. The past existed only as a reminder of their resilience, their courage, and the unshakable bond they had built. Sometimes, love finds us when we least expect it. Have you ever discovered something beautiful after heartbreak? Share your story below and inspire someone to embrace their own unexpected love. As night fell, the apartment glowed warmly, filled with laughter, whispered promises, and gentle touches. Their journey had been arduous, filled with storms of betrayal, heartbreak, and doubt, but the resolution was complete. Emma had chosen love, Adrian had remained steadfast, and together, they had created a life filled with hope, trust, and happiness. And somewhere, in the quiet streets of the city, the echoes of past mistakes faded, replaced by the unwavering certainty that love, when nurtured and protected, always finds its way home.
Thank you for watching this video to the end. I am pretty sure you enjoyed it. We have a lot of other interesting and beautiful stories lined up for you. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to get more amazing videos.